Welcome back to the Aerospace Executive Podcast. I am here with my good friend Vince Kavanagh. Vince is the Vice President of Sales, Senior Vice President of Sales for Four Corners Aviation. And he has been a leader in jet charter for a long time. So Vince is an absolute institution in the arena. So we're here to talk about aircraft charter, the industry, the opportunities, and all the good things. So, hey, Vince, thanks for coming on, and thanks for being here.
Thanks, Craig. I appreciate it. And, to come on your podcast is a big thing for me in this industry. So I thank you.
That's great. So let's talk about you a little bit. You've been around for a little while.
Yeah, I have. I did. Before I got involved with general aviation, I was in motorsport for 12 years, and luckily fell into NetJets Europe with Richard Santulli heading the front. Then at the tail end of 2004. I got involved with the marketing side for Ireland in a very big way when it launched. Took on Ireland as my destiny. They had single numbers for memberships. And before the Celtic Tiger came to town, I took it to 96 clients in Ireland alone. Took on London also as a territory, and the Caribbean, because ironically a lot of my property development guys in Ireland especially were involved in the Caribbean, so it made sense for me to cover both territories. So that was a lot of fun. That was a great time there. The change came when I moved from there to VistaJet in the very early days of Thomas Ford, starting VistaJet. Stayed with them for a little over 5 years. Had a lot of fun there also. Territory-wise, it was anything global, which is great. And then an opportunity came around to move to Air Partner to run their private jet card team, build their team and grow their platform for the jet card sales. They were listed on the London Stock Exchange at the time. We grew it very successfully. I was with them for just under 9 years. And then I had a great opportunity. First introduced me by you, Craig, to meet with Brian Proctor over at Mente Group and Four Corners Aviation. And then I think in a few days meeting up with Brian, getting up to their offices in Frisco and seeing Brian in person, Michael Rogers and some of the team, I think within a matter of days we had a contract signed and off we went.
That's awesome. So, incredible background. You've seen the industry booms. You've seen a little bit of the busts. You've seen everything in between. COVID was an interesting time. A lot of demand, not enough supply.
Sure.
Where are we at right now? Where are we at as far as the industry? I mean, I'm hearing a lot of, business is great, business ain't so great, business is balancing. How do you see us now?
It's funny. I had a call, a Teams meeting earlier in the week with a great friend of mine who runs a family office. And in part of the conversation, I quickly learned, which is going to seem obvious to you, that he's had more things land on his desk recently about new opportunities, new programs, new solutions than he's had in a long time. So I think what we've found on this side of the net of the industry, watching some of the mergers, some of the acquisitions, and sadly, some people go out of business, has been one thing. So there's been some sort of consolidation of providers, solution providers. But to the other receiving end, to the audience, they're actually probably receiving more now insofar as solutions than they have in the past. So I don't think what they're seeing from our side is anything but more opportunity for them, more offers, which makes the game a little bit harder from our side because it's more competitive, but then that's just part of the game. But I do think supply has definitely eased off, which has made it better for us. And, that famous phrase of, I guess, charter coming off its COVID heights, it has to happen. From what we went through that pandemic period, it had to happen. So I think what's being offered out there now just makes it more competitive for us. And the click to really keep your clients and to bring new clients on board is, I've always felt, is a relationship. And in that relationship, the biggest one that stands out is trust more than anything else. And solutions obviously got to work for them. It's got to suit their flying profile. It's got to suit their needs. But they've got to feel trust. And I do feel it's a lot of it based around relationships. Technology and IT is always going to play a huge part of our world. And it matters a lot. But I think the core to significant ongoing business and growing that existing business is through the personal relationship you have with the individual or the corporate entity. And that's what matters for us. And that's what when I see my colleagues and counterparts as competitors in the industry, it's that loyalty. Having that loyalty has kept their business and allowed the business to grow.
Yeah. Look, the one thing I noticed during COVID was, the demand got so hot that all of a sudden you started seeing a lot of new players come on the market. A lot of, small, 135 operators with 5, 6 jets, a lot of wholesale. And it's like, wow, where did these guys come from? It started to get a little bit, I mean, I don't know if you guys thought the same thing, but you've got this bifurcation of the well-established players, great reputations. And all of a sudden you had a lot of Johnny-come-latelys coming to the market. And you're like, wow, can they actually survive? Or is it just a little bit of a sign of the times? And then obviously, Wheels Up started buying up, Delta area, what was it? Delta, aircraft, Delta private jets. Thank you. Mountain Aviation, things of the sort. So a lot of crazy things happening.
Yeah.
Are you seeing some stability there now?
I think as an industry, definitely. Those acquisitions that happened and any merger, are normally only done on the seller's terms. They sold out because they wanted to sell out. Has there been a lot of, one-man band shops coming to the marketplace to try and take a piece of this booming marketplace, which they saw? Yes, but I think that's always been there. I just think media now, social media especially, can advertise it more. So you just become aware of it more. So I don't think that's been a factor. It hasn't really affected the business that much. I think from my background, especially from my NetJets days, and VistaJet insofar as where they own a floating fleet, you had that safety and security on the sales side of having that resource of floating fleet and crew. That was massive. Through those periods, and you probably remember yourself from FlexJet days, charter was spoken of, but it wasn't spoken of in a detailed way as anywhere near as good as being owned by aircraft. In other words, a provider that's got their fleet and crew is different to a charter. And so that audience was almost half educated that, listen, charters and like owning fleets, so keep a little bit away from charter. I think what the COVID period has done for us in that pandemic alone has allowed the audience to be educated around, well, in fact, the charter can be, through the right resources, absolutely as A, reliable, B, as safe, and C, perhaps, call it dynamic pricing, but can be in some ways more competitive than you being involved in a fixed solution where you're bound to the terms of, a great provider saying to you, well, that's all great, but Mr. Pickin, you must fly your hours in this period of time, and if you don't, X, Y, and Z is going to happen.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, they're the small piece of the contract on the way in that you're not going to either read or perhaps not be told. Yeah. And when you find them, it just becomes sore. And then if something happens or an aircraft goes tech, which is always going to happen, so at some point, you're going to start looking at your contract thinking, is this really what I want? And did I really sign up for this? Mm-hmm. And I think, so what happens with the charter world now, I think it's in a better place because it's been spoken of better, which it should be, because the pandemic period has allowed the audience to be re-educated into what's actually available in the marketplace. And that's a good thing.
It's really funny. So when I started with FlexJet, the 3.5 years I was with FlexJet back in the late 90s, early 00s, the mantra was, and NetJets was the same, we don't negotiate. Our terms are our terms. Okay. That's great, except the challenge, the problem is your buyer, your customers are really freaking smart. And they'll figure out a way. If you think you're just going to keep shoving that we don't negotiate down your throat, they're going to figure out alternative ways. And I can't tell you how many times I walked into a client's office and I was like, no, we don't negotiate. And he's like, well, then this is what I'm going to do. And it has no, and you're not included. You're like, oh, well, wait a minute. Yeah, well, maybe if we could do that, would you? Yeah. Then all of a sudden now we don't negotiate became a little bit more of a, well, we'll think about it. Well, maybe we need to focus a little bit more on the customer's needs, right? And,
for sure.
Here we are now 20 years later, 27 years later. Like you said, customers are smart. They're using a combination of fractional, they're using jet cards.
Yeah.
They're using charter. They've got preferred charter providers out there. Do you see it going that? Is that the direction? Have we reached a new plateau? Is that where we're at?
Well, I think because there's so much to be offered out there, and to your point, the customer is so much more intelligent than we may expect on the way in, that they may have other solutions in place that you won't find out about until you either get close to them through relationship building, or you luckily trip over the fact that they're also got X, Y, and Z other contracts. In a lot of those cases, and there are companies that offer this, we offered ourselves in a program called the Insight Card. They may own an aircraft, they may own a fleet of aircraft, or they might have a syndicate, they might have all of those things. They might have fractions for supplemental lift, they might have a jet car because it just made sense, and they might just charter. But they don't often know those contracts inside out. They don't know when they should do it. And sometimes when they press go because they want to fly that aircraft again, it might be the wrong time to press go on those contracts for various reasons. It might be a peak period time, it might be extra cost versus another program they have in place. And a lot of the things that work, we found, to the client's benefit is being able to educate them. And our program, for example, will go in and say, Mr. Picken, by the way, I know you want to fly next week on these trips. Rather than just burn X's hours, we've looked at all your contracts, and here's also what's available in the charter market. Here's the best option. I mean, you pick. And it might not be the most expensive or the cheapest, but here's the best option, and here's why. And I think clients really appreciate that also, because you're truly saying from an independent angle, here's what you have. Here's how you should be flying it. Because the client might think, actually, you know what, I don't need this piece anymore. It's not doing me any good. Or I need more of that piece. They're just not quite aware of it because it's not really their world.
Yeah, no, and look, it comes down to the clients are, I think what the thing that's more important to them is less about price and more about, I want to know who the person I'm talking to is going to take care of me.
Yeah,
has got my best interests in mind.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. It's just from starting out with NetJets. Yes, of course, it was a premium price program that you were doing, whether you were selling fractions in the lease and acquisition or just the actual private jet card in Europe. Regardless of what the industry said about price, it was never the first point of conversation when you sat with a prospect. Of course, it came around to it, and it certainly wasn't the deciding factor. It's so much more than that. It's so much more of a touchy-feely trust relationship thing when a client wants to commit to a program. And some of those busy, you'll know this, but some of those biggest and busiest clients you'll have may first come in on a card. They may first just want to try and buy, the typical 25 hours. And from there, in a few years' time, they become one of your largest fractions. But that doesn't happen unless they've got your trust. And a lot of it, just comes around to relationship. Yeah,
look, I'm a firm believer. Yeah, it's there's a lot of wealthy people in the world. I mean, I just get down to my backyard and I look at Wrightsville Beach and I see all the multi-million-dollar yachts out there and the multi-million-dollar homes. I'm like, there's a lot of money in this world. And it's like, if you got a net worth of $10 million or more, you should have a jet card, quite frankly. I mean, at the end of the day, it's $250,000 for whatever, but the opportunities to go and get away from the airlines, maybe it's just a couple of trips with your family a year. Maybe it's a couple of business trips. Maybe it's just a backup for the business trip that you need because American Airlines or Delta can't get you home for 3 days. Look at it. It's like, hey, look, you got a net worth of $10 million. Go buy a card. And that's are you seeing new entrants come into the market who are starting to think that way?
I think the audience that was built directly from the pandemic period. Whereas to your point, there's a huge proportion of wealth out there that just gets flying private, just doesn't do it. They don't warrant it. It doesn't seem to work for them. And they quickly realized in the pandemic period, well, on behalf of safety and timing and guarantee of an aircraft and fly this trip, I'm going to do it. And then, like I always joke with prospects on the way, and I always say, listen, this is probably one of the last remaining things that's allowed in this world to be addictive. Because once you start, you kind of fraction off some of what you're going to do in your world of flying and give it to this private and this commercial will somehow mold into most of your flying being private because it just becomes addictive. I think, some of the independent campaigns that have done the research on this, that audience is still there in a big proportion. If the number is 10, there's probably 70% of that 10 still there. So if the number is 1,000, and more, that's relevant. So there's a lot of newcomers that have come and just need the additional lift, just want the guarantee, just want that sitting in the back garden should they need 10 hours a year or 25 or more. And then it's just like anything, if you're as good as you say you are, they'll just progress and they'll think, what, let's just do this more. And that's been great for the industry because it's a new audience stemmed up from, sadly, a pandemic period.
Yeah, but I always hated the term, we're going to democratize aviation. It's like, oh, come on. It's like saying you're going to make a low-calorie pizza out of zucchini. Nobody wants it. It's gross. I can't change fuel prices. I can't change pilot salaries. I can't change, what it costs to own an airplane. So there's some fixed costs in airplanes that just can't be
You're
reduced.
right. There are many true real costs that the customer should never have to know about, but they matter. And if the question is around, well, how does it cost? How does it all come together? You then get to talk about the real things, those fixed costs, which are justified crew salaries, their FBOs, their properties where aircraft need to be kept, their hangars, their slot times at some of the most expensive airports. The things that are real, if you're going to offer guaranteed service through in, throughout with guaranteed rates and availability, there's a cost involved in that.
Yep.
And our clients are so smart and so well experienced in other avenues in this world. They get it. They just want to be told it, not surprised.
What's the most thing that's important to them? Is it, cost, safety? What are they looking at when they're calling you? Is it cost, safety, convenience? Hey, I just want Vince to take care of me and he's the guy?
Yeah, I think it's a convenience, closely in hand with safety. And then it's the experience. It's the, wow, this is what I'm going to fly on. Let's not forget that unless the guy and girls have flown on every single aircraft type that we can remember, which isn't the case, they're going to get really impressed. And that's the, part of the real attraction. And then, of course, price comes in. But if price comes into the equation, you're able to say, well, this is a completely transparent program. If you walk off an aircraft, for whatever reason, you're not happy, you call me, you can have access to your full balance of funds. We're not going to tell you every single period of time, there's now a price tag for these following reasons. So if you can offer the program on a smaller, number of hours per year, if you can make it as transparent as simple in an easy commitment, that's the big attraction. Because you'll win their trust. By doing that, you'll win their trust from the get-go.
A lot of brokers out there though. What's different? What's differentiating themselves? Are they promising? They promise in fleets. They promise in, it's ultimately a customer service world. I mean, the customers going to operators? Are they going to the people they trust? Or are they just
I think the main flow of business is still going to the people they trust. And if that's somebody that they trust that works in a big corporate entity that's now gone into working sole trade as a broker, they'll follow that broker. A lot of the allegiance the clients will have with the provider is actually with the individuals, in most cases with the individuals. And if that individual leads to a justifiable new entity, most of the clients will go with that person. And that's just the normal par for the course.
What about cabin size? Is it big? Look at what's in demand right now.
Yeah, this is what's in demand that I know now, living here in the States for a little over 6 years and loving it. There's state by state, it varies. There are that clientele that is perfect for mid-size up and down the East Coast. And there's super mid-size, you want to go East Coast, West Coast. There's a lot of business you might have in Texas as a state that just needs light jet. But then the beautiful business is the bigger stuff because it's just exciting. The transatlantic trips and further. True ultra long range flights and aircraft types are the real surprise, because when clients fly for the first time on a G650ER or something in that cabin category, it's a mind blower if they've always been used to light, mid-size and super mid-size. But I think where the traffic is, there's a threshold of clientele where the audience is in around mid-size and super mid-size here in the US. But there's a big part of that business that's light jet. And then there's a group which is mainly corporates that need the long haul lift, the transatlantic trips.
Who's buying it? I mean, is it corporations? Is it family offices? Is it the end user in themselves? You seen a mix?
It's a combination. Because with the corporate entities that have their own fleet of aircraft, they need supplemental lift. They'll always need additional lift, whether it's crew downtime, whether the aircraft's in maintenance, whether it just doesn't suit to move their aircraft for these trips. And it's better to charter. That's where the attraction is. It's individuals because they just want to do it. It can be different industries, like sports is a big thing. Not just the golfers, every other type of sport where people just want to get around on their own time, in their own privacy. So it's a real mixture.
So let's talk about let's switch gears a little bit. Jet Suite was selling cards, and that didn't end too good. Delta just pumped a bunch of money in and saved Wheels Up. You've obviously got FlexJet, and the NetJets. You've got VistaJet out there. There's some rumblings around VistaJet. What where should the buyers, where should the buyers have their loyalty? What should they be looking out for?
I think having security in the program that they're in, insofar as they're safe with their funds, first off, if they're heavily committed, knowing that their funds are safe, whether that means an escrow account or an independent account, but knowing that they've got access to their funds. And if there's limitations around that, being clearly explained what those limitations are. I think that's probably foremost. If it's individuals or corporates, that's going to be foremost concern. But I think, again, being kept up to date with any movement in the industry is vital. You don't want a client telling you that I've just read it on so-and-so's site or picked it up in the news. They have to be kept informed. And I think that's a crucial part of holding on to that business, is by informing the client of what's moving in our industry.
Where are you seeing the opportunities? I mean, we just talked a little bit about some of the roadblocks. Where do you see the opportunities out there?
We see, without trying to steal the stage, but we have a program called the Freedom Program, which really just fascinated me when Brian explained what the Freedom Program is. And it's simply buying an aircraft for a client and running that aircraft without the client having to commit to the capital outlay. And therefore, it doesn't sit in their balance sheet, so it simplifies all the reporting, IRS included. We see a big opening now and success in the fact that everything's becoming more expensive with interest rates going the wrong way. Mm-hmm. If we can go to clients that own a fleet of aircraft, for example, and say, what if we were to buy the entire fleet from you, but still give it back on a guaranteed basis? We'll keep it at your closest hangar. We'll keep the same crew or add to the crew or whatever you need to do. Keep the same flight department. We'll just pull it off your books and give you the capital back to reinvest, to do things differently. I think there's a big attraction there. Because although it's similar to a lease, it's very different because it doesn't sit in your books. It's a corporate jet as a service. So there's a big new avenue there. That, of course, is a slow cycle period to sell that. But I think that's a new avenue for the marketplace. Yeah, and I think the boast that is the interest rates going up.
Well, yeah, I mean, yeah, that's the interesting thing is, and the crazy thing is I was talking to somebody, they said, now banks are starting to think about mark to market on aircraft values. Are buyers and sellers aligned? Are buyers and sellers aligned in their, in their prices? Are the sellers, the sellers who may have bought a little bit in an overheated market, are they ready to accept the fact that their aircraft may not be worth as much as they were 2 years ago? Mm-hmm. And then you got buyers out there who are like, I'm just looking for a deal, and those deals may be still hard to come by.
Yeah, I agree.
It's an interesting time in aviation.
Yeah, from our sister company, the Mente Group, we've traded in, I think, a little over $11 billion of aircraft transactions. And we get great reports from the guys who do some of our appraisals on the market. And you see what's on the marketplace, what's for sale. And you look at something incredible like the G550. I don't think there's ever been as many G550s on the market that there is right now. But then if you're with a client, holding hands to look and buy an aircraft for them, put them into a program, or manage it for them, or put it into our Freedom Program, there are so many of those aircraft, not picking on the G550, but that are on the market that are just either trying to see what the aircraft's worth or just asking for so way out of scale what the aircraft is truly worth, mm-hmm. that it makes that period of education that bit longer because you're not getting accurate pricing. And I think that's going to be part of the process in selling the aircraft, is the education piece of what's out there, why is it priced like that, and is that pricing right, and justifying it why it's right and why it's wrong. I think that's where we are on the aircraft valuation side at the moment.
Yeah, it's a little bit of a logjam. I think is it's just a little bit of a logjam. A couple of years ago, you couldn't find a G5. You couldn't sell your mother to get a G550. Today there's a bunch on the market. Challenger 300s are starting to come available too. I mean, it's an interesting dynamic when you see buyers and sellers starting to play, and you wonder what clears the logjam out from there.
Yeah, it's going to be an education piece where a buyer or a seller is going to understand if it's priced wrong, why it's priced wrong, and that's that fine line of how you explain that.
So let's talk a little bit about go back to COVID. I mean, obviously, COVID drove charter demand off the charts, And talking to people like, I can't get an airplane. I can't get an airplane. I'm calling all the brokers. Yeah. And it's really hard. And a lot of people came into the industry and they tested it out. And now a lot of them are like, yeah, it was cool, but I'm going back to the airlines or whatever. Was that sugar high of demand good for business aviation? Was it, or was it a negative? How has it affected the industry moving forward?
I think it was only a good thing because it stimulated the industry. We had a huge boost, obviously, from demand, but it also made us become, all of us, under a spotlight. Where are we going about it the right way? Are we meeting all the right protocols we should abide by to run whatever, whether it's a 135 or whatever it might be, whatever we're operating under? Are we doing it correctly? And that was a big spotlight. And I think part of that reason why a lot of people were pushing out the guaranteed time from availability of, let's say, 12 hours or less to 24 to 48 to 72 was mainly to meet that, to make sure they were ticking all the correct boxes internally to abide by whatever certificate they're operating under. So I think that was key, which just simply meant, I think, the industry having to sharpen its pencil to make sure that they weren't cutting any corners. That meant perhaps it handicapped some operators and put some out of business. But I think, to the credit of the industry, it only made us better. And it's definitely made us busier. And it's more spoken of, as a solution now. It's more spoken of. To fly privately, there's a reason for it in a lot of cases.
Along the same lines, lots of challenges with pilots, lots of challenges with mechanics, lots of challenges getting MRO, space in the maintenance hangars.
Agreed.
I mean, is the pressure the pressure starting to come off the industry a little bit, or balance itself out, or are we going to stay a little pressured from that standpoint?
I think there's still a little bit of pressure on that, definitely, particularly with crew. Because, being realistic, how long does it take to train a pilot? And how many hours does that pilot need to fly? And how many hours are you comfortable with that pilot having flown on that particular aircraft type? So that's just, there's no money that can buy that. That's a time waiting factor. With regards to maintenance and MROs and aircraft being delivered, that's another factor. But I think the key hurdle right now is not enough crew, and qualifying what is the right crew and how do we go about getting enough of those people. And unfortunately, that's just going to be a time thing.
What are clients asking you when they're talking, hey Vince, I want to charter a jet, or I want to buy a card? Are they asking you about crews? Are they asking you about types? Are they, what are they afraid of? A lot of 20-year-old airplanes out there. It's no big deal. I get on a 20-year-old airplane all the time, but a lot of people won't.
You'd be surprised, the number of conversations I've had where that doesn't come up. And if you bring it up, which I will always, in most cases, do, because it just makes sense to bring up age of aircraft, how many hours the individual pilots have flown on what aircraft type, whether they're, second in command or the captain pilot. I'll raise it to them because it gives them assurance of who it is they're dealing with. And I'll say that the limitation of what's been set to, within the US for Wyvern and Argus rating, it's X. Well, we'll double that and triple that in some cases. And that gives the end user, the people that are flying on board that aircraft, a lot of assurance of questions they weren't thinking of asking. So I think that should be brought up, because it shouldn't be hidden. Because, there's a lot of praise that should be given to those pilots, to the crew, to how the aircraft's being maintained, to how it's been insured, how it's been looked after. And once those are brought up, again, you just give a lot of comfort to the client, to the end user, particularly if they're coming in this time.
Is it like a checklist? Are they asking for, hey, who's the crew? What's their background? Tell me about the airplane, or is it, or are they taking, or I mean, I know there's always clients out there that are going to ask every question, and then there's something like, I'm just going to get on, I'm going to get on the jet like it's American Airlines, and we're okay with that too.
Yeah, I think by doing that, you actually create a checklist for yourself to that prospect, to that client you've just taken on board. But there's nothing wrong with that. Those are questions that should be asked, because they're going to be asked at some point. They're going to come off an aircraft and just call me and say, Vince, by the way, who was so-and-so in the aircraft? Where were they before? It'll just happen in conversation. So I think there are pieces that should be brought up and not hidden. And it's not so much a selling point. It's more of an education point to give awareness of who they're dealing with.
Who's your typical client now? I mean, is it, it used to be, kind of the gray hairs, now it's the wealthier gray hairs a little bit. Now I hear it's a younger crowd. Is it a little bit of everybody? I mean, who's buying?
Yeah, it's a little bit of everybody. I think, to pick an age group, more than I've experienced before. There's a lot of clients that are in their 40s that want to do it for a time saving, for corporate reasons, to go to and from meetings, but also they want to use it for their own personal reasons, to go to a game with friends or take their family away. So I think that, again, because the market has been spoken of more, particularly here in the US, has just pricked their ears to think, actually, I'm going to do this rather than wait. So I think it's a real mix of what the generation age is that's now our audience.
Turn this thing off. You seeing a younger crowd coming in? I mean, the tech crowd, or what?
Not in a big flux. You'll see with regards to ad hoc charter, that we do and that's operated a lot. With our own managed fleet and just using our partner providers' fleet, we will get inquiries from younger generations, absolutely. But it's normally they just want to fly. They just want to do this ad hoc. They're not. Maybe it's because they're just not thinking that way yet. They're not looking at a program. They just want to fly charter.
Do you ever see the charter by, you got JSX out there right now, sort of, Part 135 from an FBO. I got no problem with it. I think that those guys are doing, I think they're safe. I think they're unique. I don't know why American and Delta are all upset about them. But on the flip side, I can't remember who the companies were that were trying to sell Falcon 900s by the seat either. Is the private aviation by the seat really ever going to come back, or is it going to hit its stride? Do you want it to?
Even if whether I wanted it or not, even if I had a business plan to do it, I just don't see it happening because unless you can really create a brand new educated audience that just want to fly by the seat, because the benefit of absolutely walking to an FBO and, boarding an aircraft 15, 20 minutes later and taxiing down the runway and flying is massive. It's a real, giggle. Getting on board, having flown private before, and now sharing a cabin and sharing seats, that's not fun. That's not going to feel great. If you've got to go to a meeting, you don't really care who's around you. That's different. But I don't think there's enough of that to warrant a business trade successful.
Yeah.
So I'll be, kind of the jury's out on that. I think it sounds so great on paper, but in actual fact to do it, that's really creating a unique concept to fly by seat.
Well, that's a lot of what American Airlines used to fly Fokkers, Fokker 100s. So it was all first class seating from LA to Dallas, and it was never that profitable. I mean, the JSX thing, I get it. We'll see where it all comes out. But I mean, that's ultimately what I think comes out to. It's such a unique business plan when you talk about, hey, I don't want to get on a Falcon 900 with seven strangers.
Yeah.
I'm going to get on by myself. If I'm going to get on it, I'll pay for it.
Yeah. I think, you're right. I think if you're flying East Coast, West Coast, there's 10 people on board and you don't know 8 of them. That 6+ hour flight is going to feel like 60 hours. Just not going to be. Now, if you're flying, shuttle service, and you've said JSX, absolutely. If you're a golf resort and you've got the same clients come down from point X to your golf resort, then why not have a shuttle service? And I bet you everybody on board will love it. But that's a great model. And just kind of wrap that all up
you got the guys that fly 737 from Silicon Valley out to Hawaii, kind of, it's like that club. Yeah, that's a lot of fun. Hey, look, we're all going to the same place. We're same neighborhood, whatever.
Yeah.
It's fun to me to see how many business plans. How did you get into? I mean, you're in the motorsports industry. What got you transitioned and ultimately really successable?
I genuinely tripped over this NetJets. I met at the time a lady that was running their HR department, Lindsay. I lived in London for a little over 20 years. I was in Bahrain a lot with Aston Martin Racing. They had the DBR9. They were developing the gearbox, so it wasn't ready yet. They had a team running the car. And I was potentially just selling the car to privateer teams, the same spec car. But I was away a lot, and I came back and met this lady from NetJets Europe. And we were just chit-chatting one evening. She said, how's it all going? I said, well, it sounds great and it looks great on my CV and stuff, but I'm getting bored. I'm away an awful lot, and I didn't want to be that way that often. So she then said to me in 2004, had I heard of NetJets? And of course I said yes, which I hadn't, because it just wasn't my world. And that they owned, I think at the time they said over 500 private jets. And I thought to myself, well, that can't be true. And it's owned by the richest man in the world, Warren Buffett. And I thought to myself, well, that definitely can't be true. Which I said in my head, of course, I said, oh, yeah, of course I knew. So when I got home, I tap on Google at the time, I realized, oh my God, this is for real. This is a real thing. And she set me up a meeting with the guy who's still my dear friend, Mark Beyer. And we just got on really well. I met in their offices in Sloane Street at the time. He talked about the industry, talked about what it's like. And I felt straight away just an attraction to the industry, to the exposure of your clientele, not to show off who they were, because it's all confidential, but to get to meet those types of clients, to have success with them, to provide a service like private jets was such an attraction for me. And then I was given Ireland, being the Irish guy, was a real buzz, was a real magnet. And that was it from there on in. And still am to this day. I'm as buzzed today as I was when I first got noticed of the job with NetJets in tail end of 2004.
Yeah, I always found it was funny. It's like when I was selling out in LA, people had 10 people waiting for them, and a client would be like, "You're the jet guy. Come on in, head of the line." So everybody was always enamored with the jet guy. It was incredibly fun, and the relationships I built with the clients was pretty amazing.
I agree. Yeah. I'll never take that for granted. Some of the people you meet, the avenues you go down, the places you end up to meet clients, to be with clients, is just it's one to be really cherished, and I've adored it from the start.
How do you see the industry moving forward from here? Are you bullish? You cautious? You bullish? What are you thinking about? So goes the economy. So goes private aviation, and everybody is keep. There's some doom and gloom in the air, but I'm not so sure that's the case. What are you saying?
You've said the word bullish. Not naively, but I always think bullish about it, because I think if you're as good as you say you are, then you know where you can still find the audience. So, and you said before on other things that, this rotates, it swings, this world that we're in, private jet world swings, similar to property. You've just got to be ready to stay along for the ride and have your clients that are with you. Of course, you may lose some along the way, but it's all around a relationship. So I would be confident going forward, no matter what may happen, that we can find that new audience and continue to build.
Yeah, I look from a sales standpoint. I love the way you're thinking about it. It's like, you always could tell the Johnny come latelys, because they're praying that the good times always roll. The established players who are really good are like, hey, look, I'll flex. When the good times stop rolling, I still have my clients, and I still know who they are, and I still know how to attract them. Yeah, and that's ultimately how you figure out who's wheat and who's chaff.
Right, I agree with you.
It's where there's chaos, there's opportunity, and quite frankly, sometimes I just want to see my weak competition get flushed out because they can't hang.
True. Yeah.
They create a lot of noise out there. So the Four Corners Freedom Program, it's pretty unique. You guys it's aircraft as a service.
Correct. It's corporate jet as a service.
Corporate jet as a service, and I know you're seeing a lot of interest. In that concept.
Yeah, and the attraction to hence the word freedom, the attraction to the program is that it's so transparent that it allows us to have a conversation with, a Craig Picken is thinking about buying an aircraft. Craig Picken that owns a fleet of aircraft that wish they didn't at the moment, would rather have them off their balance sheet and let us own them, give them back, including the crew. So I think how the freedom program is talked about and explained to the audience is vital, because it is as simple as the term says, freedom. There are, some of the, again, it being a long cycle, some of them are short, but when an entity knows that freedom can come in, replace their entire fleet, allow them the capital back to reinvest or do whatever they wish with their own capital, and yet still keep tabs on their aircraft. In other words, still have that aircraft at their closest hangar based on a guaranteed availability. We can then say, and listen, over a 5-year period of the contract, what if we charter the aircraft and absorb some of your costs per year? Some clients will go, no, we don't need to. Some will go, well, actually, we only fly 200 hours a year, so can we look at maybe charting 100 hours a year? That allows a tool for success to the client. And for us, it gives us an inventory, another aircraft. And if we bought a fleet of aircraft from Craig Picken, for example, and after 3 years or 4 years in the country, you say, actually, what if I wanted to buy the aircraft back? We don't have a conversation where we go, no. We say, let's have a conversation, let's do it. So it's always in the client's best interest, but I think it's a program where it's a refresher because it's something truly new.
Yeah, it was a unique concept when Brian rolled it out. And I'm glad to see it's getting some traction. I mean, especially today where the political environment is such that, maybe I don't want my tail number tracked, or, I don't want to land in Europe in front of, 50 protesters who are taking pictures of the airplane and tracking it back to me.
Yeah.
There's a lot of reasons. I think there's a lot of reasons to go a different, there's a lot of reasons now companies have to go that route.
Yeah, optics, plays a big, and I hadn't forgotten living in London for so long and being from Ireland, but optics plays a big piece in this world of general aviation. And when I was at eBase and everything happened and people were strapping themselves to aircraft and locking themselves to Gulfstream, I quickly realized, again, as a reminder, how optics plays a big piece in the European world because it's just so much smaller geographically. And, we got a lot of inquiries directly from eBase just because of that scenario. So that matters. If we talked about this 15 years ago, it would be a topic of conversation, but it wouldn't be that vital. Now it's a vital piece. The optics plays a big vital piece.
Mm-hmm.
Freedom program really shines for these guys.
Yeah, no, I love it. So good. How do folks get a hold of you, Vince?
Well, naturally through our website, fourcornersaviation.com. My email is vkavanagh@fourcornersaviation.com, or you and I on this podcast. My number is 954-955-4582.
We'll get it out there. So Vince Kavanagh, thanks for coming on.
Great to see you, Craig. Thank you again.
Awesome. Talk soon. I hope you enjoyed the latest edition of the Aerospace Executive Podcast. You can reach out to me directly, Craig at northstaresg.com, or check us out at www.northstaresg.com. You can subscribe to this podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, Podbean, or on YouTube. Just do a search for Aerospace Executive Podcast. Thanks again. I'm Craig Pittman.